by the record stores, 'cause I never know what I'll find. I never remember to brush my teeth at night, but I will in the morning, and I'll greet you with a kiss under the sunlight.
Before we get started, I need to apologize for something, which is that in my Gen X Hate Revisited video, I stated that the last Buddy story until now had been Hate Annual number 9. And I had no idea that the trade paperback collection of those annuals, Buddy Buys a Dump, included a new story, which kind
Right,
of a bridging story for
right.
getting Buddy out to Washington again. So to everyone listening, you got to buy either the complete Hate or at least Buddy Buys a Dump to get that
To
missing
get that, I know. Yeah, it was my
saga.
publisher's idea to didn't necessarily I didn't agree, but he says let's just skip the last 8 annual and just go straight to the trade paperback and stick your news story in there. Some people felt like it was a ripoff, where because they're like I was collecting all of them and now I have to buy all those stories all over again. But whatever.
Now that all 4 issues are out, how has the reception of the whole series been from your readers?
Well, everything I've only heard good things. It's all the but I just it's not like I'm getting flooded with mail, and I always knew that its appeal would have to be limited because I'd imagine it would only make sense to somebody who's already read the old Hates. If you've never read Hate before, I can't imagine what you would make of this miniseries. So, like I said, that automatically limits the appeal of the thing. But Fantagraphics, and it also was like co-published by my Spanish publisher. It was my Spanish publisher's idea to do this miniseries. They offered me a pretty generous advance to coax me into doing it, and they seem very happy with it and happy with how it's done. So I guess all is well. The only criticism I've gotten at all about it, and I think you said the same thing, is feeling like the art doesn't look as tight as I used to. Like there's something off with the inking. Um, and I have no idea what you're talking about, but that could well be my eyes are giving out. Like my eyes just are not what they used to be. So I obviously am not seeing what as well when I'm inking it. I'm not seeing the page as clearly as I used to. That's my excuse.
I didn't mean to be cruel in
Right.
those
No, well, you weren't
comments.
the only person that said that. But that's just it's terrible because I'm like, what are they talking about? I think it looks fine. But because I'm just losing it in that department.
When you knew that the series was actually happening, how long did it take you to come up with the stories for all 4 issues?
Um, it chilled pretty quick. I mainly just had to think a lot about format. What gave my Spanish publisher the idea of doing this is I did a book signing tour in Spain, and my publisher came accompany me with she accompanied me on most of these signings, and I would give talks as well. And everybody was saying, "Do more Hate. I want more Buddy Bradley." So that's what gave her the idea. She's like, if everybody keeps saying this, then it makes sense for you to do it. The big problem, though, was I knew that when they were saying that, I want to see Hate again, they wanted to see Buddy when he was in his 20s and in love triangles and getting to fistfights with his roommates, all that shit, all that Archie shit. And I've always made Buddy Bradley, whenever I've written him, did comics about him, I always tried to keep in mind he's 10 years younger than me. I like that 10-year distance to put between me and my character. But and so I figured if I'm going to visit Buddy Bradley again, if I'm going to revive him, I got to bring him up to speed, bring him up to the present while still making him 10, so he would be in his early 50s then. Um, but like I said, I knew that even though they wouldn't necessarily admit it, I just knew that people were nostalgic for the very early hates. Like the sales of Hate kept going down, especially with the Hate annuals. They didn't sell nearly as much as the early ones did. And I just assumed it's like people like to read about young people. You know, that's the audience. The people who buy alternative comics tend to be, or at least they were in their 20s. And they obviously were not interested in reading about a middle-aged married man with a kid. You know, it just it's like sitcoms or it's like or any TV show where there's tension, you know, love interest between a couple, and it's always will they, won't they, will they, won't they? But once they do and they get married, then it's like, I don't want to watch it anymore. I think I
Yeah.
experienced the same thing. So then I came up on my own. I came up with the idea of with this Hate Revisited series of having it both, having it flashbacks drawn in the old black and white style, and then bringing them up to the present. So people will get both. I'll still get to show Buddy now, which is what I wanted, but also make readers happy by doing the flashback bits. I've never in my life, in all the stories I've written, I've never once used flashbacks. I personally tend to hate them, especially when they're used compulsively. It's almost impossible to watch a TV show, any drama. They rely so much on flashbacks, which more often than not is used as a cheap, lazy way to make the story more interesting than it is. And I find it exhausting. But I thought I could be very careful and selective in how I use it, you know. So I tried, I think there was one exception, like in the first issue, maybe but I tried to open and close each issue with a flashback. So it wouldn't jumble up the story, you know?
Hmm.
But I really enjoyed those flashbacks, especially everything that I did with Stinky. I was like, I had myself constantly saying, why did I kill off this character? He's so hilarious. I was like laughing out loud while I was drawing them. So
I loved the Stinky flashback. I'll show them because it's so tragic to have him ranting at Val about how he's only getting started and his best days are ahead of him, and you're just picturing him dead later.
right. Well, that was my reason for killing him off is I said, I don't, where am I going to go with this character? He of course is based on a lot of people I've known, but and either they in that those type of people who inspired him, they would either they die young or they would keep being that way, which is tragic. You know, it's not amusing once a person is middle aged. It's not cute or funny anymore for them to be that way, to be that impulsive and self-destructive. Or and you know, there's examples of people I've known who are like Stinky, who would you know, they'd go on the wagon, you know, they'd clean up their act, you know, but then they're not, but then he wouldn't be Stinky anymore. You know, what's the point
Yeah.
of having drawing a Stinky character if he becomes boring? If he suddenly just becomes just some regular guy, you know, who cleaned up his act.
Yeah.
So yeah, and also I was thinking, you know, people die in real life. I'll have a character die, you know.
The flashback in of young Butch in the fourth issue too has a similar kind of melancholy to it, I think, because you see
Right.
how Butch ends up, and then you go back to his youth of playing with GI Joes and stuff, and it's funny, but it's also kind of sad and touching.
Right, because he didn't grow up.
Yeah.
He's not very intelligent, unlike his brothers. Like somebody must have dropped him on his head or something. Yeah, because again, it's like a Stinky character where, yeah, it does become tragic when somebody doesn't grow up. Yet I still find it, for some reason with Butch, I still find it funny. The way he is as an adult still makes me laugh. I don't know why.
Well, before any flashbacks, the first thing we see in Revisited number one is stretch pants, and then in each subsequent issue, more stretch pants.
Right.
Why did you feel it was time to revisit stretch pants?
Um, I think we did me and the guy that wrote Stretch Pants, who also in Old Weirdos, we used to collaborate on Martina Baton. It's a guy named David Corino, who decades ago we were roommates. That's when we started working together. He went to high school with my wife, so
Hmm.
we've known him for a very long time. And just what he comes up with is just hilarious. His own drawings are hilarious, but he just doesn't want to take the time to make it print ready. You know, they're doodles. They're really quick doodles. Um, but I always loved the way he drew. Just looking at his quick doodles are so funny. So I try very hard to capture when I redraw his stories. I try really hard to capture all the gestures and faces that he makes.
Hmm.
Um, and there was a weirdo book, a big tome. I don't know if you saw it that John Cook put out.
The one about all the different contributors over the years.
Yes, yes. And he asked, and we obliged. He asked if me and Carino would do some new Martini Batons or new Jesus Critters, which were other another strip that we used to do. And so David sent me a bunch of ideas for Jesus Critters, and they were all hilarious. I think I only drew two of them, but every single one of them was funny, and it was lots of fun to recreate his stories. So with this hate annual, I thought, why not? Something to put on the inside front and back covers. It would be great. Otherwise, I might have, who knows, revisited Girly Girl or something.
Mhm.
But I was thinking David always comes up with really funny ideas. So I asked him. He was thrilled, and he sent me a bunch of ideas. And and some of them you may have noticed are, for a lack of a better term, are pretty politically incorrect.
Yep.
And I got, I was like, because people can be so vicious these days, I actually, I paused. I thought it might be crazy to do this. Would this kill my career? But then again, I'm now collecting Social Security, so I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
And and also the ones that I was like that made me nervous, like, oh, people might lose their shit over this. They also made me laugh out loud. So I felt like such an idiot not drawing something that made me laugh out loud. So there
Yeah.
you have
In the first issue, we see Buddy working from home in Tacoma, but it's not specified what sort of work he's doing these days. Did you have any particular work from home job you think he'd be doing in
it.
2023?
It's the same thing that he was doing in the Hate Annuals. He wound up owning a scrap metal yard way back when, about 10, 15 years ago, after I already had Buddy working at a junkyard shop. I met a guy who did that. I was at some party and he told me that was his job. Yeah, and again, you'd think he didn't have that look. He didn't look like the guy that works at the dump. Um, but he just looked like a regular clean cut guy. And so when I asked him about it, he said it's a family business going back to his grandfather. This family has always had a scrap metal business. But he says for him, he doesn't touch this stuff. He sits at home, works in his pajamas, and it's just buy, sell, buy, sell. He's just staring at a computer screen and doing business with mainly from people in East Asia who are buying scrap metal from North America. And so he just arranges all the transactions and sells the prices online and hasn't touched scrap metal in like 10 years. So when I revisited Buddy, I thought, well, that's what he's doing now. He's doing exactly what that guy was doing. So it's still scrap metal, but he just does it from the spare bedroom.
Also, regarding the first issue, do you think that George and Val ever discussed having kids, or was that just something that neither of them were interested in?
Uh, I never even thought about that. But yeah, they seem, especially Val, but to be honest, both of them, they both very much seem like the types that do not want to have kids, for whatever reason, with Val, it would interrupt her yearly visit to Paris.
Yeah, and is Val still sleeping with her sugar daddy in Paris?
Yeah, yeah, sure, why not? Assuming he can still get it up. But even if he can't, she'd still go visit him.
Oh, well, that's sweet, I guess. Yeah.
Yes.
At the start of issue two, we were talking about opening with flashbacks. It was really a pleasant surprise to see Buddy back in high school because right away it's like, oh, we're going back to like the neat stuff era too.
Right.
When you decided to have flashbacks in the series, did you know that you would want to go as far back as that?
Yes. I wanted to fill in some blanks. I wanted to, and especially I wanted to go back and show moments that would add context to the stories that I was doing in the present day. So there's going to be an issue. There's going to be a story or a couple of stories where Buddy engages with his sister Babs quite a bit. So I wanted to revisit his teenage year relationship with her, and how testy it was, typical sibling crap. But I also wanted to at least remind the readers how, unlike a lot of other unlike Butch, how Babs really had grown up. She's not the same. She's not at all the same as she was
Yeah.
as a teenager.
Yeah. Having Buddy's old dirtbag friend Kevin be the one who introduces him to Stinky felt like a very logical choice. It actually
Yeah.
got me wondering about Stinky's first appearance, because his first appearance is in the last issue of Neat Stuff, correct?
Yes.
Do you?
Actually, he made like a very brief appearance in a girly girl comic. He
Oh,
was her
okay.
he was her camp counselor. And
Okay, okay.
the
Yeah.
reason for that is I had met somebody from Michigan, and she told me that when she was a kid, um, her camp counselor was Iggy Pop.
That's
Which I
great.
thought was hilarious. What brought it up was in her house, she was like married to a football player, a guy that played for the Seahawks. And in her house was a personalized signed autographed nude photo of Iggy Pop.
Whoa.
And she's like, yeah, to Candy. Best wishes. And I'm like, how do you have that? And she goes, oh, he was my camp counselor. I was like, oh, okay. What a nice gift from your camp counselor. She said, well, he didn't give it to me then. But
Of course.
that's where I got that. So then I thought I did a story where Girl the Girl and Chucky Boy were at a camp. And I said, I'm not going to make it Iggy Pop, but a very similar character. So Stinky was partly he was inspired by Iggy Pop.
Huh.
I should say too that that story in the Hate Revisited, um, where Buddy meets Stinky for the first time. That was a true story. That's how I met. He also has since deceased, but that's how I met a good friend of mine.
Hmm.
My school it seemed almost like on a weekly basis we were getting bomb threats. This is like in 1975, 74, 75. So we'd all have to file out. Nobody was taking it seriously because it was happening so often, but we'd all have to go outside and wait until the all clear. And then it turns out what a classmate of mine, a really good friend of mine, he introduced me to this guy. He says, "This is my cousin Joe."
Hmm.
And I said, "Hi." Basically what happens in the story, that was all true. Turns out he was the one that was making all the bomb threats. And it was only to get his cousin out so they could do a drug deal. And I was just like, can't you wait till after school? And he said the same thing too. I said, why the bomb? And he goes, well, I can't just go walking right into your high school to make a drug deal. And it's like, I think you would get in more trouble by making bomb threats. I think that's a bigger felony.
Did he used to steal cars also?
No, no, that was that was another friend of mine, would just show up, at my house in the afternoon or at a party in the evening. And the funniest one was it was this old car. It was this really old, rare European car. So this is from the 70s. So yeah, this is a totally different friend who's a Stinky inspiration. Um, and I'm like, what's with the car? And he goes, oh, I borrowed it. A friend of mine lent it to me. Or he would say I bought it. And I remember he took me for a ride in it, and it was a stick shift, and he had no idea how to drive a stick shift. He almost ran people over. It was inside to jump out of the car. This other friend is the guy that was always borrowing cars and borrowing pot. Yeah, he once gave me like 2 ounces of pot for free. And I was like, "Why?" I go, "That's awfully generous of you. Why would you do that?" And he goes, "Oh, I found it." But of course, he didn't find it. He stole it. He broke into somebody's house and stole it.
Yeah.
But he was the type of guy. Let's talk about a lack of impulse control. He was the guy that while we were on swings, he
Oh, yeah.
tried to go all the way. Actually, I wasn't there when he did it, but a mutual friend was there. He tried to go all the way around, and he wound up in the hospital. This guy went to the hospital a lot. And another thing he did too was there was a paddleball court, an outdoor court. So it was like this great big blank wall. and he decided that he was going to ride his bike as fast as he could right into that wall just to see what would happen. And he
Wow.
got hurt. He went to the hospital.
Yeah, yeah. Did he ever get stabbed trying to mug someone with his own
No, but
knife?
no, that was a bit of fiction, I think. Or who knows though? That might have came from somewhere in my head. That sounds somewhat familiar.
Hmm.
Yeah.
The
I just thought that that would be that whole thing with Stinky trying to mug someone. I thought that was like that would be a very perversely touching thing for Stinky to do. Like Buddy sees a record that he doesn't even really want. He's just thinking, I don't have the money for this record. Doesn't even really want that plasmatics record.
yeah,
But Stinky is like, I want to be this guy's friend. I'm going to do a nice thing. I'm going to mug somebody and give him the money.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I also had that, that also would explain why Buddy was like Stinky. It was like, well, that was insane. He wound up in the hospital. Sure wish he didn't do that. I didn't want him to do that. But at the same time, he did it for me,
Hmm.
So I guess I have to be his friend now.
The stealing cars thing kind of adds new context to that hate issue where he shows up in the Miata and
Oh,
Jay asks, "Where did he get that?" And Buddy goes, "He probably stole it."
yeah. Look good.
It's a girl's car,
Yeah.
but still. Uh,
Yeah.
I was
Oh, I
asking.
wanted one. I wanted a Miata really bad
Oh,
with it back
oh.
in the day. Back then, I thought they were beautiful until I rode with one. That's so funny. A lot of sporty cars, it felt so claustrophobic. It was a convertible, and I still felt claustrophobic in it. I
Mm,
was like, I don't want this car anymore. And I
mm,
had another friend too, a very successful lawyer who would collect. He would collect classic sports cars. Uh, Corvettes and early Mustangs, and they look so gorgeous. And I was whenever he would pull up to my house in one of his classic cars, I would beg him to take me for a ride. I'd always regret it. They'd always feel so we're so used to modern cars. The same with where I am now. I have a neighbor, this old timer who lives up the street, who had a Model A, and he took me for a ride in his Model A. And it was just grind, grind, no seat belts. Fortunately, it could only go like at most 20 miles an hour. Wherever we went, there was always a line of cars behind us, stuck behind us because we were going so slow. And a good thing it went slow since there was no seatbelts.
Well, the reason that I was asking about Stinky's very first appearance was I was wondering, seeing the first time that he and Buddy met, why, when you wrote Buddy the Weasel, why you felt like he needed a new dirtbag friend for that particular story, like why it couldn't have been Kevin, the other kind of dirtbag friend.
Well, yeah, well, because is kind of a lug,
Mm,
He doesn't he wouldn't bring much of a spark to the story, It's fun. I put Kevin in the Hate Revisited
yeah.
because I've had several friends who told me they really like that character. Like it's like I knew that guy. I definitely knew that guy. So it's like, all right, well, maybe I should have used him more. But but I couldn't picture Kevin being Buddy's partner in crime,
Hmm.
literally or figuratively. He's too,
Yeah.
grunt. Um,
He wouldn't be shooting seagulls at the beach with him.
well, he would, but like Stinky had notions, Stinky was hyperactive, restless, up for anything, full of ideas, most of them bad, or even if they were good ideas, he had no follow through.
Mhm. Well, related to that same story, Buddy the Weasel, I have a really pedantic, nerdy question about the continuity of Buddy's virginity, because that's the story where Stinky gives him a hard time for still being a virgin and reveals that he sees prostitutes. And then in Hate Revisited #4, we learn that Buddy lost his virginity to Wendy Whitman.
What early issue was it where
In that same story, where the first like full-fledged appearance of Stinky, they're
oh yeah, but that was like around the same time, that would have been,
okay.
roughly the same, but he was 18. He was still in high school in that story, just leaving high school. So that was like roughly around the same time.
Well, I guess I was wondering if it meant that like Buddy was lying to protect Wendy's reputation,
Oh,
to
well, not
like
necessarily.
like she asked him to.
Right.
Um,
Well, I was just thinking there had to have been a first time somewhere for Buddy. So,
yeah,
and again, that also was with how that all played out. That I also did that story as a way to show why Buddy might have had, it's like some people might say misplaced, but why Buddy also, just like with Stinky, had like this sense of loyalty and debt to Jay, you
mm,
know, and just how much things had changed because largely because of Jay's mainly his drug habit, his heroin addiction, which always would rear its ugly head and cause Buddy problems. But
yeah,
but I also wanted to show why one of the many reasons why um Buddy loved Jay at the same time, helped him
yeah.
get laid, practically ordered him to get laid.
I loved that he asks to listen to Devo with him because Devo's my favorite band.
Oh, yeah. But I also couldn't imagine listening to Devo while stoned either. But yeah, no, I love Devo too.
Wendy's friend Melissa Crane, aka Melissa Fellatio, was there ever any thought of bringing her back, or maybe having her be the one that Buddy loses his virginity to?
Well, I couldn't imagine that. I couldn't. I mean, people can surprise you, but I couldn't imagine a girl like Melissa being up for that, especially with a boy like Buddy, who obviously was
she,
just gonna, it was going to be a hit and run, and she
yeah,
would know that. So if Buddy really truly liked her, that would have been a different story. But he didn't. She's a
yeah,
nerd and she's square
yeah.
and and not that cute.
She really liked him though. What a neat guy, right?
Oh. That's true. Yeah, I mean, if I just never came up with a reason to bring her back, I just didn't know what I would do with her.
Yeah. Well, I mean, right from the start of issue two, I thought, oh, if neat stuff is on the table, who else from neat stuff might come back? And I always thought she was really cute in that story.
Oh,
Um, when also in that issue, the you mentioned the plasmatics records. Is that how you discovered plasmatics by checking out Wendy O. Williams on the
oh.
cover of Metal Priestess?
Um, well, I was living in New York City at the height of all the
Oh, right.
punk new it. Yeah, I moved to New York City in '77. So, and I can remember I almost went to see it not far from where my girlfriend at the time, where my wife and I lived are you familiar with New York City at
Hmm.
all?
Hmm.
We were living in Chelsea, and on some abandoned pier in Chelsea on the Hudson River, uh, the Plasmatics were gonna play a concert, and then I think they were gonna drive a car into the Hudson River, something like that. They were all about stunts, obviously, chainsaws and her boobs and you name it. So we almost went to see her for that, but there was such a throng. There were so many people going to see because it was the newspapers were covering it. It was like a really big deal.
Hmm.
So that would have, if I did bother to deal with the crowds, that would have been the only time I saw the Plasmatics. I
Yeah.
wasn't into them though. I thought the music was terrible.
Oh,
But yeah,
okay.
of course, I like looking at pictures of Wendy or Williams. Everybody did.
It's such a good period detail in that story that he says to Stinky, but he says, this record store doesn't have anything like I can find at the record stores back home. In that sense of
Right,
like having to go to the cool hip record stores to find the cool hip music.
right. The limited edition stuff. It's like, fine. I didn't buy it, but a friend of mine I remember bought. I hope I'm not misremembering. I seem to recall before their first album came out, a friend of mine bought a 45 by the B-52s.
Hmm.
And I think it was like an early version of Rock Lobster. I hope I'm not misremembering it, but I can remember, and I just remember being really curious about it. It's like, what's this? Because I never heard of the B-52s, and there was somebody holding a record by them. And that's something you wouldn't find at the mall.
Yeah. I wanted to ask about the subplot in the second issue about Harold's homeless friend Spam and how Buddy and Lisa go to do reconnaissance at his encampment. Was that inspired at all by the actual homeless problem in Tacoma?
Yeah, well, homeless problem everywhere. With me, just like, and I've never been close. I've never been like good friends with somebody that was homeless, but I've known people who were either temporarily homeless or known of some people who are homeless by choice. Like when it comes down to it's not ideal for anybody, but for some people, it's like, well, is the discomfort of being homeless, even if it means sleeping in your car, is that preferable to paying rent? And obviously, a lot of people say, yeah, it's preferable to paying rent, even if you have a job, even if you could pay rent. Some people would rather not. And also, I was just thinking about, and this is also based on not again, not direct experience, but friends of mine, other parents have told would tell me how what it's like for your son or daughter to befriend people that you're not crazy about, and uh, and also be reminded that like with they're now adult children would say, "Hey, you used to tell me stories about all the crazy stuff you did as kids," so your past comes back to haunt you.
Yeah.
Like a good example of that would be Robert Crumb, his daughter Sophie Crumb, who very good artist in her own right, but she went through a period where she was making her parents nervous wrecks. She was living just very free spirited, wild, crazy lifestyle, and they both Robert Crumb and Aileen Crumb told me they were very nervous about her and very scared. But yeah, she was always throwing their past in their face. She goes, "You've done comics about it. You've done all this crazy. Dad, you told me how you used to ride the rails." He goes, "Yeah, but he's like, I would never advise anybody to do it. I almost got killed." Yeah,
Um,
so I was thinking of that like I want Bud and Lisa's son to be a decent person, but I also want, of course, he's intrigued by the stories that he would hear about his own parents' past because they were, especially his mom, but they were crazy. And, so he wants to have his own little bit of crazy, his own bit of rebellion, like
yeah, yeah.
not telling his parents that he let Uncle Butch.
it's a it's a great fake out in that fourth issue because I think it's right before the page turn. You're like, he goes, "You can come on out now," and you're expecting spam, but it's Butch.
Yeah, Uncle Butch with his AK-47. And of course, like if and when Buddy does find out that that's where Butch is, Butch is going to say, "Hey, you were the one that told me that the feds are after me.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You were the one that said I should run for my life, where you won't let me live with you." So, God.
I was so nervous reading that last issue because you have him firing off his guns on the front cover, and the last time we
Oh.
saw him, he was already preparing for the coming race war. So I was so sure he was going to wind up dead by the end of this. And the way things leave off with him, he's not dead, but he certainly still seems like a danger to himself and others.
Yeah, sure. Shooting his gun at nothing in the middle of the night.
I know. It's like, what are the odds he accidentally shoots Harold? I'm worried for him.
Yeah. Well, I guess Harold knows not to show up in the middle of the night, maybe. Who knows?
Yeah. Another stinky question. We find out that he's Jewish in this series. Was Stinky always Jewish in your mind, or is that something that occurred to you when you were coming up with the new stuff?
Um, yeah, a little bit. It's I mean, I never mentioned it, never wrote about it in any of the hates until now, until this business. But yeah, again, it's like some of the people, a handful of the people who inspired stinky people I've known. There's one archetype which is a Jewish guy that doesn't want anybody to know that he's Jewish. If you ask them if you're Jewish, they'll do this long thing about how, well, it's like, I'm not religious. It's like,
Yeah.
that's not what I meant, you know. But to be honest, it always made some kind of sense to me if he was, but there never was any reason to put that in a story, to make it a story. But since I was with this hate revisited, since I was writing about um, the very first time they met, I thought, well, maybe that's something that would come up. Maybe that's something that Stink would want to make crystal clear right away is that he's not
It's
Jewish.
it's it's so funny that he brings it up. He said, "What did
Right.
did Kevin tell you I'm Jewish? Because I'm not." It's like
Oh,
nobody
right.
asked.
And then when I came, the other thing too that made me figure out, well, I should make this a factor is when I realized I thought it'd be great if Buddy winds up meeting his mother, of course, much later. And I thought, well, maybe when he meets his mother, maybe there'll be something about her where she really seems Jewish, or somebody that might have been Jewish. So, and that would make it come back. So that's where I thought, well, maybe I'll have Stinky will say this thing, the in passing,
Yeah,
defensive things not Jewish. And I said, okay, and that'd be funny but he confirms from his mother that yes, he is.
yeah. Her asking Buddy if Stinky ever reconnected with his Jewish roots or whatever is a pretty
Right.
funny payoff.
Yeah. Well, I made myself laugh too when Buddy went, hell no. It's just furious. But of course he can't say to her, well, the reason I'm asking is because I'm getting this Jew vibe from you. But when I first met Stinky, he made a point of saying he wasn't Jewish. I
Yeah.
mean, he's not that rude.
Yeah, and incidentally, it's funny, but Jay mentions that he's Jewish in his first appearance, and I think it literally never ever comes up again.
No, no, I forgot that. I even forgot that I mentioned that he was Jewish. That's
Yeah,
funny.
he talks
But
about maybe I should move to Israel and live on a kibbutz.
yeah, well, I didn't even change the name. There was a guy I knew in high school who was Jay, and it's terrible. His name was Jay Spano. I didn't even change his name,
Oh,
which is a Spanish name, except that, and I don't know if he ever confirmed it or not, but in that house that he lives in, this big, old, dilapidated mansion, and where Jay lives, that's where the Jay that I knew lived. The attic was like, it was an old apartment for servants. He had a whole apartment with a working kitchen to himself, but it used to be where servants used to live way back in the day. But yeah, I remember, even though his last name was Spano, um, I remember getting, this sounds terrible. I remember getting a real Jew vibe from his mom. I was like, all right, well, his mom must be Jewish. Because there's nothing Hispanic about her. She seems very Jewish. So I don't know. I guess it's the same thing.
one of those Spanish crypto Jews, I guess. That
Yes.
that's that.
Support.
Yeah, yeah. That scene where Buddy meets Stinky's mom is incredible. It's so sad and melancholy and touching, and it really feels like it's making everything from the old flashbacks in the Neat Stuff days come full circle back around to everything that's happened since then, all the way through Hate. I really loved that scene.
Oh, yeah. Thanks a lot. Yeah, I figured that when you meet her, it would explain a lot about why Stinky was the way he was. For one
Yeah.
thing, she obviously, she was a hippie lady. So just in the house that they lived in, he was exposed to everything. He was exposed to, you know, pornography. Might have been hippie pornography, but it's still pornography and sexually explicit material, drugs. He's stealing her speed, he's stealing her pot, and she doesn't really care that much. So there's no boundaries there. He can't with his mom. He can't. There's really not much to push against, which makes him just push harder and harder and harder
Yeah.
until he's riding a swing all the way around the pole.
Right. Right. Well, I also really liked in issue 3 how Alexis, Babs's daughter, is so glad to see Buddy and Lisa. She's really come a long way since that scene in Hate where Lisa's asking if she wants to draw and she doesn't want to draw anything. And Lisa's thinking, well, how about I draw me throwing you off a cliff? It's so nice to see that they finally get along now. Because Alexis
Well,
really used to think that they were just a couple of weirdos, but now she's like so
well,
happy
that's
to
just
see them.
it. That's just it. As then they moved away. They moved back to the West Coast, Buddy and Lisa. But yeah, I guess her and her brother, just the thing, they were kind of cool. Uncle Buddy and Aunt Lisa, they were kind of cool. They were different. They were kind of cool people. So yeah, compared, our mom's a nurse, who almost married a Muslim, a lazy Muslim. Uh, so
Has that been your experience that kids who may not like their weird older relatives can become closer as they grow up?
it would depend on what the kids themselves are like. if they wind up either becoming somewhat different or thinking of themselves as different or open-minded, then, they'll develop a warm spot for the weird
Yeah.
relatives, whereas, especially if they were raised and told that's your weird uncle, that's your weird aunt, watch out.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, they were kind of cool. It's like now, I remember hearing this music at their house or seeing this art at their house, and now that's my favorite stuff. And they knew all about it way back when.
Yeah. Yeah. It seemed like you were always dropping hints and hate that Tyler might be gay. But is he really gay, not gay, as Alexis puts it?
Right. That's a term that I referred to somebody who I knew back in Seattle who had good looking guy, had lots of girlfriends. He wasn't gay, but he gave off such a gay vibe. So not to his face, but I always would refer to him as gay, not gay, you know. And so yeah, with Tyler, yeah, because he liked to cross dress and stuff
Right.
like that. But of course, I could also think of 1,000 instances where it's like, is this kid gonna grow up gay and he or she doesn't? They
Hmm.
just don't. The same with a girl who might be particularly butch when they're young and likes to play with trucks and like sports, and then they get married and have 5 kids. Um, I thought it'd be funny to make since mom has Ma Bradley developed this late stage homophobia.
Yeah.
I just thought it'd be funny that she might not have minded it so much at the time, but now she has like what for her would be bad memories of Tyler always dressing up in his mother's clothes, you
Yeah.
know. And so now she's like, oh, well, I keep hearing that that's a sure telltale sign. Nobody outgrows that shit. That's what they
Yeah.
say. You know?
Well, and then he's a waiter in Miami, and even Buddy is
Well,
like,
yeah,
"Come
of
on."
course. So he's gay, not gay.
Yeah. Do you foresee that Bab's new relationship with Jay will last?
uh, yeah. Well, if he stays on the wagon, sure,
Hmm.
why not? You know, Jay's an intelligent person. So here I am talking about a fictional character. But how I think he's a totally intelligent person. He just has a fatal flaw. If he could keep off the stuff, then the sky's the limit, and he could, a career, a business, a relationship. He can make any of them work. It's just that, he's fallen off the heroin addict several times,
Yeah.
and that's what screws things up.
Do you think Bab's true love was always Tom, the cop?
Yeah. No. I'm sure that it'd be like, at the time, he's the boy that kissed her, so of course she has a thing. He kissed me. I guess we're getting married. Um,
It was nice to see him again, however briefly. Those panels where he's macking on her again are really funny.
right. Um, but yeah, but I'm sure that as years have gone by, that'd be something that Babs would recollect and just go, ew.
To talk about where Butch ends up again, does the thought of living out in the woods away from civilization hold a particular fascination for you? Because, of course, you did Apocalypse Nerd, but
Right.
there's also that two-page strip in Neat Stuff where like Buddy is talking to Tom and Kevin about his living out in the woods fantasy.
Right. Um, well, yeah, there is something somewhat appealing about it, especially like living off the grid, which I find fascinating. I once pitched that as a comic. I once pitched to, I think it was to DC to do a series about I was gonna make it could have been anybody, but I remember pitching as like a young female, somebody with no survival skills. It'd be kind of like a young girl version of Apocalypse Nerd.
Hmm.
And they didn't buy it though. But yeah, I was very interested in the whole idea. Still am of living off the grid if you can manage it. But I don't pretend to have any survival skills. Even for me, like going to a small town, like even a small town like where you are, um, like if I'm taking a drive through the woods or if we stay at a B&B in some small town, it's always there's this 24-hour period where I think I could live here. I could definitely live here. This is the thing. This is what we're doing. This is what we're gonna do. Small town or the woods. But then like the next morning, I'm like, get me the fuck out of here.
Is this truly the end of Hate, or could there be another miniseries in the
Well,
future?
at least from the people who actually bought it and read it and liked it, like all the people who were telling me that they really loved this Hate Revisited series, they also are all asking me to do more. And I haven't ruled it out, but I need stories. It's like I touched on some things, especially with Butch, that I could keep going with, but I need more than that. I'm not going to make it all about Butch. So if I get a burst of inspiration, come up with a whole bunch of new story ideas, then sure, then
Mhm.
I'll keep going.
Have you considered perhaps a Marvel style What If series where instead of it's what if Gwen Stacy had lived, you could have What If Stinky had lived?
Oh, well, no, I haven't thought of that. Um,
Or what if Buddy married Sally, the crazy girl from Starbucks?
oh, there you go, that girl. Um, I haven't thought about doing that either. Yeah, well, yeah, I would need uh I would have to have I'd really have to have a great story idea. Like if for some reason something struck me, it's like, what would that be like? And suddenly flooded with story ideas for a what if, then I would do it, but nothing has occurred to me along those lines.
Okay. Well, then can I ask what your next project is going to be?
I don't really have one. For Reason Magazine, at least two, three, four times a year, I've been doing these four-page biographies of various historical figures. And that will eventually be a book collection, but I don't know when that would be, when that would come out. I'm always worried that the Reason Magazine is going to say, we don't want to do those anymore. It's like,
Yeah.
all right, well, then I'll just take all the ones I've done and put out the book collection then. Um, and that's a lot of work doing those because that involves homework. It's like when I was doing those biographical graphic novels, just the homework alone took up more time and energy than actually drawing the thing.
Well, yeah, you've mentioned your interest in doing a Brian Wilson biography, and if that ever happens, I would really be looking
Yeah.
forward to that.
Yeah, and I'll think about. I hear he's not doing so great, and he is old. So I would think more earnestly about that when he passes. Not like I'm wishing for him to die, of course, but um, yeah, because whenever somebody famous dies, there's always a lot of stuff that you find out once they're gone.
Yeah.
And it's not like I think he might have secretly killed somebody, but there's always some things that have been kept, always things that have been kept under wraps and you don't find out about it until after they're gone. So there's that. But the other thing too that makes me second guess myself about doing a Brian Wilson uh, graphic novel is his story has been told so many times. So, well, on the one hand, that tells you people are interested. They're interested in him. If there's been so many docudramas and biographies and autobiographies, I think he's told his own story two or three times. Um, so obviously there's a huge appetite for it. But at the same time, it's like, what am I going to say that all these other biographers haven't already said? Even if the only thing that would be different about it is that it's a comic book. So I also it's like I love all of the Beach Boys. I'm a big Beach Boy fan, and I don't take sides. I love Brian Wilson, but I also love Michael Love. I'm like the only one.
How about the Mike Love
So
biography?
well, more like what it would be hard to do because there were five, sometimes six of them. But I tried to think about would it be possible to do like a Beach Boy biography, a graphic novel, but it's about all of them.
Yeah.
But that might be too difficult to do to tell the story of five and six people, in 80 pages. I mean, it would
Uh,
have to be, I'd have
yeah.
to time limit it somehow. I wouldn't be writing about them now. I'd probably be all 60s, 70s stuff.
How
I
about
don't know.
just how about just more Murray Wilson rock and roll dad?
There you go. Oh, that cartoon, which I created, in case whoever's watching this or listening to it doesn't know, uh, got around just during the dot-com boom around in the early aughts, there was this old animation channel called Icebox, and they had a lot of money behind them. They commissioned all these. What they would do is team up an artist or a cartoonist with a writer, a comedy writer, and have them come up with a short cartoon show. They're like 4 or 5 minutes long. And so there's a comedian I know named Dana Gould, and we both I can't remember which came first. Us talking about doing something for Icebox, or if we were just talking about something totally unrelated. But we had both had just seen a Beach Boy documentary, um, and we were both laughing about the character of Murray Wilson. In the show, he seems so over the top, so Jackie Gleason, and Jackie Gleason meets Archie Bunker, and also Dana Gould personally knew the actor that played Murray Wilson, so he was laughing twice as hard just because he's watching his friend act like a lunatic. So then Icebox asked us to come up with a show, and we talked about it, and we're like, well, we both got a lot of laughs out of that Murray Wilson character. Do you think we could get away with doing a cartoon show about just making up our own cartoon show about this actual human being? And they said, yeah, they greenlit it, and we made four of them. And we had so many ideas. We still had so many ideas. You wouldn't think so, but we had a million ideas for
Well,
that show.
you did some strip where you sent him back in time, so
Right.
the possibilities are limitless.
That's right. And yeah, and I did a strip where because how can you not? I did a strip where through Murray Wilson's son Dennis, he meets Charlie Manson. So there's like a million things we could have done with that. Like if Murray Wilson wound up producing Charlie Manson,
Yes.
put out a record. We're gonna take the world by storm, kiddo. So yeah, there was a lot of material to mine there, that's for sure.
Yeah, I'm amazed he didn't get sued, but maybe he'd sue now. I
Yeah.
don't know, or his estate
There
would.
are we well, I don't know these people. Like Dana Gould works and lives in Hollywood. So he's met Beach Boys or Beach Boy adjacent people. He's met a lot of celebrities, and he's met some people. He knows some people that knew um Brian Wilson's mother, Audrey, the Wilson brothers' mother. Um, and we showed her as a tipsy drunk and an enabler, and Dana said that they were mad about that. We could do whatever the fuck we want with Murray, the child beater, but they're like, man, why'd you have to go after Audrey? And the answer is because it was funny.
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you for being so generous with your time today, Peter. This has been a real privilege, and thank you again for Hate Revisited. It was funny and touching and all those things, and just a delight to see Buddy and everyone else again.
Sure. Well, thank you. Thanks for your interest, and I really appreciate the bits that you've already made.